God of War Ragnarök can be described as many things: a thrilling story, a visual masterpiece, even Game of the Year. As a graphic designer with an interest in UX UI, what continuously draws me to the game is the sheer attention to detail. From Kratos' decorative Leviathan axe to the context-dependent dialogue for every companion, and of course, the massive world of the Nine Realms. Immersion is the true name of the game. Part of the goal of UX UI, however, is to spot the places where immersion is broken and then find ways to address them. For me, this was in the game's UI design. This is a case study of two specific issues: the visual design and the user flow of the craft upgrade screens. Warning: screenshots containing potential spoilers may be ahead. First, some context. In the last several years, Sony has set itself apart for its commitment to accessibility. It has earned a reputation for surprisingly extensive settings in other major titles such as The Last of Us and Horizon series. So when God of War 2018 released with a notably inaccessible UI, it came as a shock. Amongst the main issues were text too small to read, poor color contrast, and inconsistent design language such as confusing button design. This equals large font and high contrast color palette were attempts to correct for 2018's mistakes. But for many gamers, the improvements were hit or miss. Some major visual concerns include heavy drop shadows, tight spacing, default looking gradients, and inconsistent or overly tight letter spacing. The tightness of the layout is partly due to redundant elements. This screen, for example, has not one, not two, but three headers telling us we are inspecting the Leviathan axe. Let's see what happens if we remove a header and give each stat its own row. Already looking better. Overall, the game's UI is simply too busy, with clashing textures and effects, strange overlapping elements, and beveled edges that frankly make the design feel a little cheap and outdated. The game's user flow is similarly confusing. At first glance, this seems like a simple list of items that you can equip, upgrade, or purchase, until you notice there are two equipped icons and you realize these are two separate categories: the main weapon and its attachments. So you start to wonder, if I can equip different attachments, does that mean there are multiple axes in the game? The answer is no. You set aside this quirk and carry on until you start discovering shields. Here, not only are there multiple attachments, but also multiple shields. So why is the axe even listed in the shop if you can't switch it for something else? The answer is that the upgrade, craft, and purchase screens are combined into one. As an upgradable item, the axe has to be listed there. And since you can equip items as you buy or craft them, the axe needs to have that icon too. But even if the game had multiple axes, the layout would still be confusing. Here's a similar screen from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, a game that was released in 2018. Here, the upgrade, craft, and buy-sell screens are separate menus. Once you enter a menu, every category of item is shown, be it your weapons, shield, or armor. You won't find items already owned in the buy menu, and you won't see for sale items in the upgrade screen. This layout, while easier to navigate, has one drawback. It relies exclusively on icons to distinguish between items. If two items look similar and have the same level, the user has to hover over it to see what it's called. For some, this is a small concession, but it's perfectly valid for others to prefer God of War's version. So in the spirit of compromise, there should at least be labels added to the layout to help clarify the information displayed. With the context covered, let's talk strategy. For a redesign to realistically work as an alternative, it needs to work within the limitations of a budget. This includes time, money, creative energy, but also the system's memory and storage. A developer may pour resources into some aspects and later reallocate them as priorities and circumstances change. Let's take special effects and accessibility as an example. At first, it may appear like more resources went into Ragnarok's accessibility to make up for 2018's mistakes. But even with a reduced look, it still seems like too many special effects were attempted, negatively impacting the execution of both categories. Whenever a compromise is necessary, it is always better to prioritize. In this case, the team should have committed to a well-designed, minimal UI. The freed up resources could then go into providing multiple UI options, accommodating various color and contrast scenarios. Which leads to a dilemma worth talking about. Quote-unquote inaccessible design can look pretty cool, and many gamers say they prefer the overall look of 2018's UI. To help resolve this dilemma, let's consider Cyberpunk 2077's map. I personally cannot tell what's going on here. I have fairly typical vision, yet this screen is practically unusable to me. But I'd be lying if I didn't think it looked cool. Instead of redesigning it, a better strategy is for CDPR to include a toggle that can switch to a more readable map. The investment, I believe, is worth it. These examples demonstrate that the solution is not simply all or nothing, but represents a strategic middle ground that is up to studios to explore and refine. So what should the game's UI look like? There are a few existing elements such as ornamental lines and illustrations that could be emphasized. But as with most user interfaces, the game's brand and marketing materials are a great starting point. From there, we can derive a preliminary color palette and utilize the graphic styles. Refine the palette a bit, formalize the graphics, and we're halfway to a design system. Next, let's talk typography. Part of why the bigger font affected the layout probably had less to do with the size and more with the font itself. Gil Sans is just a weird looking font. Letters like the capital R, Q, and lowercase a, d, and r look okay on their own, but compete with each other in a word. Compare it with Noto Sans, an open source font by Google. It has less character, and that's why it works. It doesn't distract the reader. While both fonts support Latin, Greek, and Cyrillic, Noto supports a total of 150 scripts, meaning that it might be the only font needed to support all the regions the game is released in. The memory saved in reducing the number of fonts might leave room for a cool looking header font like Azul. This font does lack the Germanic or Nordic diacritics used in the game, but it's not unusual to commission the expansion of a font whenever necessary. Finally, we will retain the game's minimum of 24 points for body copy, which while on the large side, can still look good if given enough space. With our design system set, let's begin the redesign. We start by reusing an element found in the game as a frame to contain our information. Next, I really like this fog effect in the loading screen, so let's remove the logo, make the background transparent, rotate it, and push it back a little. Now let's bring in the animated version of the same screen, flip it upside down and crop it, add a label, and we have our first navigation button. Bring in the rest of the group, and our bottom navigation is done. Next we add in the player stats, a bit of artwork to fill the space, and our menu. Let's finish off with a preview for each option and bring in our hero Kratos. For the second screen, let's add sorting navigation, create the components for our shop items, and add in the details. Let's not forget about our little octopus monster hanging out at the top. You might notice we still have 3 labels for the Leviathan axe, but moving this one down and adding a header for the handles now gives it some purpose in clarifying the navigation. So with our design complete, let's see it in action. Now let's see it again with the original UI side by side. Just a little note, the demo contains only still images of Kratos, but a real version would contain his animations too. Alright, let's watch. By making use of the game's brand and marketing, we achieved a look that is more consistent and flexible to accommodate potential accessibility needs. In an industry known for tight deadlines and developer burnout, strategy is not only important in making a better product, but also ensuring the health of your team. Time, energy, and money saved by efficiency can then be used to build a customizable layout, enabling players to modify and enhance usability. What do you think of this strategy or anything I talked about in this video? Did I nail the redesign or completely miss the mark? I want to know what you think. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you later.